dive right on in and talk about the album, which is almost a week old now.
Yes, that's
Or,
hard to
or
believe.
would it be actually? It well, literally would be a week old actually today.
Yeah.
Two. That was a week ago today. Nature's
Let me,
Child. Yeah.
I'm going to grab it. Hang on a second, because I
Okay.
usually have
Yeah.
it right with me.
Yeah. The album, of course, is Nature's Child: A Dreamer's Journey, and there you got it right there, the CD. I love the colors on the artwork. By the way,
Thank you. Thank
love the way
you.
that looks.
Thank you.
Really cool album. I've listened through it now 3 times
Wow.
since the release. One was part of an interview you did, and that had from last week that had all of the songs, and a couple other times as well. So really familiarizing myself with all the music on it is. I'll start by saying, having a daughter who's about to turn a year old in 11 days. Um, a lot of the lyrics, and I know it's not like a children's album per se, but there's some of that in there, and the notion of inspiring and dreaming. And I know as you talked about in this, talking about this album, that's a core element to it. So it struck me a certain way. What was your first inspiration to do this album, and how did you want to direct the lyrics and the message towards? Is it for kids? Is it for anyone? All of that. How did that all happen?
Well, the initial inspiration was for kids, because in the 80s, when I was touring full time, like 250 days a year, I was just amazed. It really, from the time Nobody hit, that song hit really big and crossed over, there were just a lot of kids that came to the shows. They loved the bouncy feel of that song. And even though it had an adult theme, really, kids loved it. I had so many little kids bring their 45s for me to sign. It was like 45s were almost over then. And they kind of had a resurgence because all these little kids wanted to buy the record. And so, I mean, it sold like 2 million singles. It's just incredible. So as I was looking back over that decade of touring, I realized, boy, wouldn't it be cool to have some music with messages of things I'd want to say to a child, to these little 8, 7, 6, 10-year olds that came to the shows. And this album was really born from that idea of wanting to write some music that I would actually, of things I would want to share with these kids, things that I think are important for all of us to hear, no matter what age we are, really, like I love you for who you are, and, you know, use your imagination. I think so often as we grow up into adulthood, we're really kind of pressured by our culture to put away playful things and just get to work. And
Mhm.
I think we can do both. We can work, we can be responsible, and we can carve out time in our lives to use our imaginations and play and create a life, because we're creating our lives every day, whether we're aware of it or not.
Mhm.
We are creative beings. We're creating our days. So why not create some fun and really, I think this music is pointing people inward to listen to their own inner child. So it's really for the child of all ages, but for kids and for the child within us all.
How biographical are the lyrics? How biographical is the album to your life?
I think it's very biographical, actually, autobiographical. It's my whole life I've been a dreamer. Even my earliest memories, at 3 years old, I was watching American Bandstand and, had kind of a premonition that I was going to be on there one day. And um, yeah, it's very much from a place of experience within my own life experience. I have been a dreamer and continue to dream. I've read a lot about dreamers in my life, and one of the dreamers I read about was Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein used his imagination every day, and it's one of the reasons why we have some of the amazing science that we have today. Is a lot of the theories that have been proven now. Um, so he would take naps throughout the day, and he would hold a ball in his hand as he sat in his chair, and when he would drop off to sleep and get into that in between place between sleep and wake, his hand would open, the ball would drop, he would wake up, and he'd realize he was in this little reverie, and his subconscious would be working on the clues or even the answers sometimes to the problems he was working on. So I'm a big proponent of having a rich inner life, which I have. So in that way, yes, it's very autobiographical. This isn't just woo woo whimsy. I mean, I feel like I'm creating my life, and I created what I dreamed about even as a child. So yeah, it is.
Manifesting it, if you will.
Yes, absolutely.
What it, the lyric in don't be afraid to dream, actually, it kind of reminded me of my childhood. Growing up in the 80s, I was big into the space program at that point, and I mean, this is shuttle era, this is way past it, as I know you're talking about in the 60s and Apollo and that. But that was my genesis of getting interested in that era. And I remember I'd lie in my bed as a kid and imagine myself strapped in the shuttle, getting ready to launch. And as I'm listening to the song, I'm like, well, I can completely relate to that. Now,
Yes.
granted, it never ended up on the moon. I'm pretty sure I'm never going to get up there, though the way space travel is going, you never know at this point. Any of us could find ourselves up there at some point pretty soon. But it struck me as a universal thing that, and even if maybe the dream doesn't quite go as you imagine, like I said, it didn't end up as an astronaut, it's still something to go, okay, how can I get into this other world? The notion of imagination, and that ties to that other song, love the riddles in that, and
Oh,
all the imagination one can have.
yes. That song, Imagination. And let me just, before we leave, Don't Be Afraid to Dream. The first verse really is autobiographical. It was me singing along with the radio. In fact, I originally used to sing the song when I was a little girl. But when I got into the recording project for this album, I realized, no, I want to make it more universal. Once there was a little girl, it's because lots of little boys and girls sing along with the radio or along with the internet or stream. They're singing along, imagining themselves on stage singing too. So I didn't want it to just be about me. I wanted it to be a more universal thing. And yes, imagination. It's an amazing story how that song came to be. Verlin Thompson and I wrote it, and we wrote all of the music first before we wrote a word of the lyrics. And he had just been to Oklahoma to visit his family, and he had been watching his nephew out in the backyard. He was standing in the house, looking out the window, watching his nephew. His nephew had a cape tied around his neck. He had a stick in his hand, and he was waving it around in the air and marching around the backyard. And we just started describing lyrically his nephew in the backyard, dancing a melody. He lives in a song. Wherever he wants to be is where he belongs. Painting rainbows in the sky, doesn't stay to watch them dry. And then we got stuck because we didn't know what the next line was going to be. But after we took a little break and came back, we realized, oh, we just described a butterfly in flight as well. And then we realized, oh, the verses are like riddles. So this song, we used our imagination all the way through the writing of that song. We had no idea where it was going. The melody, the music was written from having a conversation about using your imagination, but we didn't write any lyrics till it was all done. So yeah, it's kind of a magical song to me. Most all these songs are very magical to me.
Um, on Every Time a Train Goes By, that's another one. Again, flashbacks. I don't know that I've had an album that's provided as many flashbacks, and maybe again being a relatively new parent, suddenly all of that starts coming back to mind, perhaps. But I grew up literally next to train tracks here in Eau Claire, on the north side of Eau Claire. My house was right next to that, and I didn't have the experience of like, oh my gosh, afraid of the train or anything. But I do definitely remember that. But what it also brings to mind, and I wonder if this for you, what was that, and what was a similar thing for me, was thunderstorms. Storms would scare the heck out of me. I'm fascinated by them to this day, but they would scare me until finally there was that one day when I was 8 years old and finally made the crossover to like, no, this doesn't scare me anymore. Now I love the ambiance of it and everything. It's okay. I mean, when it's not dangerous, it's good. What was that for you? What was that for you? What were the experiences that scared you and then you finally got over the hump and now you almost embrace it?
Well, this song is definitely autobiographical.
Mm-hmm.
This happened to me. We lived in a trailer park in Kokomo, Indiana, where I grew up. That trailer park uh, was not a very big one. Our trailer was on the back corner of the lot of all the trailers, and our our trailer was here, our driveway, and then the train track. I mean, we were right on top of the train track. And so as a 3-year-old kid, when that train came by, I mean, it shook the ground. If I was in the trailer, I could hear the dishes rattling in the cupboards, and it was terrifying for a little bitty girl to hear and to see. I mean, it loomed large over me when it went by. Of course, I wasn't near it for a long time. But one day I realized, wait a minute, it doesn't destroy anything when it goes by. When I come back out from under the trailer where I've been hiding when it went by, it it it's everything looks the same. So I just determined in that moment. I mean, at 3 years old, I look back now and I can't really imagine that I was thinking like this as a 3-year-old. But it was before my brother was born, and he was born when I was 3.5. So I know I was 3. And so the next time it was coming, I made myself stand out there and watch for the train and just stand there and not run. And I was terrified, but I didn't allow that terror or that fear to make me run. And I stood my ground. And the beautiful surprise is as the engine of the train got right beside me, the engineer leaned out and waved at me. And in an instant, I went from terror to joy. It was an experience that really was a foretelling of my life, because I think all of our lives are really a series of us trying to do what we love to do in life, and then facing all the fears around it, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
And for me, that experience became very symbolic of facing my fears. And if something is scary in my life, what if I just stand still and meet it, allow myself to feel the fear, and be open to whatever it might have to teach me? And in that case, it taught me that it was loud, but it wasn't going to hurt me. And just loud and scary doesn't mean it's going to harm me. Now, sometimes it does. And, we have good human instincts. Sometimes we need to run. But in that case, it was a real life lesson for me.
With all of these songs having meaning to you, is there one that means the most of the 12?
I don't think so. I think they all have their place in my heart. So it's hard I'm not much on judging anything or giving something more credence over something else. I think this album as a whole, all of these songs, it's like the album is like a piece of cloth, and every song is a thread in the woven into the cloth of this record. So, I think the reason I chose Nature Child, which is a song on the album, I chose it to be the title of the album because I felt like in so many ways it held the core of the feeling of the record. And for me, in my own life, as I've grown up and gotten to this part of time in my life, I realize that I have more and more embraced nature as I have embraced my own true nature. And I think that has been a lot of focus inward for me, a lot of processing my life, looking at my life, learning from my life. And as I drop down into who I am more, I find myself out in nature more and just observing and feeling one with nature. So that song is really kind of a culmination, at least to this point in my life, of what is important to me and seeing myself not apart from the world. Yes, I have a rich inner life, and I'm also a part of this physical world in a way that I feel like I'm in a sense of harmony and peace with it. And I'm paying attention, I'm paying attention to things that I want to do to be a caretaker. I go out every morning and feed my birds and watch my squirrels and just I'm really enjoying that. So that song really encapsulates kind of where I am at this point anyway.
Mhm. You have nice turns of phrases among the lyrics on the album, clever rhymes, and it kind of, as I see it, especially what country music used to sound like. Especially, I remember back when I used to DJ on a country station here in the building. I mean, literally through the window that's right over there is the country station that I started on 2 decades ago, and I remember being impressed by the turn of phrase in country lyricism. And I felt some of that in this set of lyrics, and seeing you being the main lyricist on this album, where do you get your lyrical inspiration, your sense of your use of the English language and the poetic sense that you have?
Well, I think it starts with my mother. My mother worked for General Motors. My mom and dad both worked for General Motors, but my mom sat on an assembly line. And as you can imagine, it's kind of mind-numbing work, just over and over, soldering this, putting this piece in, next, and it's going really fast. And my mom, from my earliest memory, she would write poems and little songs, and she would have to hold them in her mind until break time. And at break time, she would tear off a corner of her lunch bag and write down the lyrics she was holding in her head. She would repeat them over and over so she wouldn't forget them. And I think I was around my mother from, all those years, and it was just second nature. My mother was just writing, pretty often, and sharing little things she'd written. And so I knew it was possible to write, though that wasn't my main passion at that point. I just loved singing, and I just wanted to sing. I wanted to move to Nashville, be a singer. And then I worked the first job, really that I had those first 4.5 years I was in Nashville was at a music publishing company. And I was around these fantastic songwriters. Dean Dillon, who wrote all those a bunch of the George Strait hits. Kai Fleming and Dennis Morgan, who wrote a lot of my hits and a lot of Ronnie Millsap hits, and Barbara Mandrell, and on and on. I was around these really first-class songwriters that were very great lyricists, great at writing music. And I think I've gotten it by osmosis in a sense. But, toward the end of the 1980s, after that decade of touring, I had this sense that something was changing inside me. It's like I loved singing all these great songs other writers wrote, but I felt like I wanted to express something that I was having to do between the songs on stage instead of during the songs. So I think I've just drawn on all of this osmosis of understanding how songs are put together. One of my jobs at the publishing company was I typed all of the song lyrics into the database. So I understood the structure of music. I these people that I worked with were my friends. I sang their songs. I sang harmony on their demos. So I think I've gotten it just by, learning from great people that I've been around, and my mother starting there. So that's really the history. And I really thank and I'm grateful for all those people, because I think they've given me a sense of who I am as a writer now.
There are a lot of great collaborators on this album as well, both lyrically, arrangement wise, session musicians galore. I know there's so many. If we went through all of them, probably be here for another half hour going through each and every one, but highlight some of the collaborators you worked with on A Nature Child.
Well, the writers that I worked with were Verlin Thompson. It started with him back in the late 80s. Probably between 1988 and 1990, we wrote half of this record, 6 of the songs. And we wrote both lyrics and music together in a room together. He is one of the most fabulous songwriters and singers and performers. Verlin Thompson toured for many years, over 20 years, with Guy Clark. And that's, he's well known in the music industry. So, having his expertise as a writer on there, I really thank him. Tom Schuyler and I wrote the lyrics of Every Time a Train Goes By. And Tom is just a fabulous, oh gosh, he wrote 16th Avenue. He was a part of a group that was on RCA for years, Schuyler Knobloch. I'm trying to remember the rest of they were a group, a band. Anyway, Tom is a great writer. And then Craig Bickhart, we wrote together If I Only Had Wings on the record. And that was written, I think, sometime in the mid 1990s. And at the time I wrote it with him thinking this could be on this record, having no idea it would be this long before I'd actually make this record. And then, of course, John Mock, who's my collaborator, one of my best friends in the world. co-producer, engineer on this record. John Mock and I wrote, during the recording of this record, we wrote 4 songs. We wrote Nature Child. We wrote Home Is, Hey, 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 It's a New Day, and Dancing Over an Emerald Isle. Those 4 we wrote during the process in 2020 while we were recording the record. So yeah, I'm working with some really great people, and the musicians. There's 2 bass players on the record, but Matt McGee I have worked with since 1983. He worked on the road with me all during the 80s, and he is a fabulous bass player. I mean, the world should know. When you hear him, the bass playing on this record, which you have, it is world class.
It is.
Fabulous.
That jumped out to me. Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, of course, Don Johnson's the other. He played upright bass on several of the songs. So, but all these string players, they're the A team in Nashville. They're the top cream of the crop. John Mock is a composer, and that's how he mainly thinks of himself, as a composer. I think never thought of himself as a songwriter, but his music, the way he writes music, to me, there's a folky kind of feel to the way he writes melodically. And I love writing lyrics to his music, because it almost feels like the lyrics are buried in the music, and all I have to do is listen really closely and just let them rise up out of the music. That's how it feels. That's how special the music he writes is.
Do you have a favorite, either children's album or, like you said, like inspirational, dream focused album? Is there another one or several others that you go, you know what, besides obviously your work, another one you'd point to people and say, that's really solid, that's a good thing you'd want to have your kid listen to, or yourself listen to make you feel good and more inspired?
Well, my all-time favorite album is by Harry Nilsson. This may surprise people. Now, I grew up on country music. I love lots of Patsy Cline, and all those people inspired me. Johnny Cash, all those people. But there's a record that when I first heard it many decades ago, it's called A Little Schmielsen in the Night. And I've got it on vinyl, actually. It's you can probably see vinyl here behind me. It's right in front, because it's my favorite record, and it's all orchestrated, and it's all standards. But every intro that the orchestra plays, and then he starts singing, the intro was to a different song, and then he starts singing this other song, but they're all standards, so all this music. That record inspires me more. I cannot explain why. It's dreamy. Harry Nilsson's vocals are just effortless. There's no push in anything. So that's my record. That's the record I just find, if I want some inspiration, just put that record on and I'm good.
I'll have to give that one a listen. I've heard of Nilsson Schmilson. I haven't deep dove too much more into his album tracks. That I'm going to have to give a listen to it at some point. Sounds really fascinating.
Yeah, A Little Schmielsen in the Night. Yeah,
you'll
love it. You're going to be addicted. I'm sorry.
I will plan accordingly for that. I love how he makes how he made the plays off of his name too. It's a clever thing with that too. We are now, quickly before we go, a couple questions about Nobody, but one in particular. Well, one I've always been curious about, and the other is more of a broad thing because of what this year is in terms of the significance of the song. First, considering you had some early country era music videos and some well-produced ones, why was there no video to Nobody? That I've seen anyway.
There isn't. And I would like to know why too. I'll tell you, it's because the record label, RCA Records at that time, was so surprised at how well it did. They were totally caught by surprise. They didn't know, and none of us knew that it would be the big record that it was. And I think by the time it took off, I was on the road, and I'm not even sure we could have made a video. I was doing 90 fairs in 120 days that summer. And that fair season had been booked the year before nobody was even recorded, I think. So it took us all by surprise. And there's some performance videos when I did it on the CMA Awards. You can see that online. But there's no video. And
Hmm.
maybe in some ways that's a good thing, because when people hear that song, they relate it to their own life. They don't think of the video. That's one of the things I always was concerned about in the early days of video making. It's like, I don't want people to just now when they hear the song think of the video. I want them to create their own video in their head.
Hmm. It's a tricky thing to do because of how associated videos become with songs, and sometimes the video can overtake it. Is there, of the videos you did, is there a favorite of yours?
Hmm. I think, those I did some early performance videos. I did, in fact, CMT played the Matador video, which is not one of my favorite songs. I know a lot of people love that song, but it's not one of my favorites because it's bullfighting, and it's people are hurting animals. So that was the first concept video that was played on CMT at the time. But I don't know that I think uh, I like just performance videos, really. I'm not much into the storytelling in that way. Now, I am making a series of storybook videos that are like lyric videos.
Mhm.
And we're using this theme of the book that's on the cover, and we're putting the lyrics on the picture behind. And we've just finished making the second one, and we're going to make them in order, like of the songs on the record. Now that I would imagine a parent and a child maybe sitting down with their iPad or whatever, their tablet, and listening to the music and reading the lyrics along and seeing the pictures. Now that's a little different than kinds of videos people normally make. So
Coming up with a sketching out plots and all sorts of stuff like
yeah,
that.
like little mini movies.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So second to last question for you. One more on Nobody. We're on the 40th anniversary of the song now, and
Jeez.
that I
I know.
but 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 that's a milestone. And top 15 pop hit, top 5 AC, number one, of course, a country. You get the ACM award the next year. I mean, it's a significant moment. Looking back over the decades, how does it sit with you today, that whole experience? You were kind of describing it just a moment ago of what it was like in real time. 40 years on, how does everything and becoming a name that people know to this day, for especially those of us in the pop world, know you because of that song?
Yeah.
What does it mean to you today?
I look back in astonishment, really, because that was not planned. It happened. We always tried to make the best records we could make, but you never can plan for a record to take on a life of its own like Nobody did, because it went up to number one on the country charts, and it was starting to come back down. And RCA had this meeting with the regional promotion people that week and said, okay, on to the next record. And one of the West Coast guy, Carson Shriver, said, no, 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 you don't understand. The biggest pop station in LA just went on Nobody. They're playing Nobody. And it was like, what? you know, they didn't make that happen. Of course they facilitated it after they saw that pop radio was interested in the record, and they went for it. Thank goodness. I'm glad. But uh, what it was like as I look from this 40-year vantage point, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful because it really becomes a foundation in which I can make records like this. And people will still, like you, will want to talk with me about the new music I'm making. Um, and and I hope it's an inspiration to people that at this time in my life, I'm still making music. I'm still writing music. I think I was taught, and most of us were taught when we were younger, that the height of your creativity is in your teens and 20s. Bull. That is bull. I am more creative now than I ever was in my 20s or 30s or 40s. It's like you can take all this life experience and bring it to what you create. You don't have to. It doesn't. But it's funny. What we believe creates our reality. It truly does. And if I didn't believe I could do this, I wouldn't be doing it. you know.
Mhm.
So I hope it's an inspiration for people to look at their thinking. And if you're telling yourself, I can't do this, I can't do this, well, guess what? You won't do it. But if you decide to say, well, what if I just say, I'm open. I'm open. I think I could do it. Okay, I'm going to do it. It's amazing how life comes to your aid and
Mhm.
just helps you do it. It is just fascinating. So, looking back, I think my life so far has been just nothing short of miraculous. And I'm grateful. I'm thankful for the fans that are interested. I'm thankful for you for wanting to talk with me. And I hope to keep creating.
And that leads to the last question. What do you think you would, unless you already are starting, what do you think you would want to create next? What musically or lyrically is just kind of you be pondering for a future project?
Well, at this point in time in my life, I've learned because things are changing so quickly in our lives that I don't set out big goals. Look at this record. I mean, this record began 32 years ago in the writing, and it's taken this long. So, I'm going to live my life day by day and ask this really great question that my coach gave me. What wants to happen? Stops the mind. Because if I say, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do now? There's kind of a push in it. But if I say, what wants to happen today? And then something usually rises up. Oh, go here, do that, call that person, write this. So I don't know what's next, but I know whatever it is, I want it to be filled with presence and no push in it, just joy. I want to create in joy. So there may be another record, there may not be. I know right now we're very much passionate about creating these storybook videos for each song. So that will be, the focus this year, I'm sure. Um, but I can imagine going out on the road with this music and singing for families and children um, and just that's where I am right now. Who knows what the future holds?
Well, the now is plenty fascinating. Nature Child, A Dreamer's Journey, out now. Sylvia, it's been an absolute blast getting to talk to you today about the album and other aspects of your career. Thanks for doing this album. Really inspirational, and
Thank you.
looking forward to all those future storybook videos coming out and more from you down the road. Thank you so much, and all the best. Take care.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.